everyone, good evening and welcome to Prem Connection. That's right, where we create your stories, the two aunties. I'm Auntie Renu. I've been called auntie for years now, so I kind of got used to it. And there I have my partner in crime over there, Auntie Kamal. Hello, Auntie Kamal, how are you?
Hi, Auntie Renu. How are you?
I'm doing good, hanging in there when I can get these gadgets working. I get so confused between on Zoom till now. It's been a year with COVID and I still haven't figured out how to use microphones and headphones. So
I know. We belong to the old era when it was the regular phone, not as this, and dial, so it's for us.
Yep, of course. And today we're going to learn about another new platform I just heard about, which I deleted from my phone. So I'm going to learn about that one. And then, of course, we have Miss Sheena with us, our co-host, who helps us get our technical stuff together. Hi, Sheeny. How are you?
Good. How is everyone doing?
We're doing well, Sheena.
Yes. And then we're bringing on this just beautiful young lady today who Kamal and I go back years with. We've known her since she was probably about this high. And it's so nice to have her back on the show. But I'm going to give Sheena the privilege to go ahead and introduce our lovely guest today. So Miss Sheena, go ahead.
So I first want to thank Kavita for coming on the show today. This topic is very near and dear to my heart. So thank you so much. Kavita Sharma is an entrepreneur in the wellness and earth medicine industry. Her values around female empowerment, diversity, and inclusion are deeply expressed in her work. Her mission is to have conversations that change people's lives. The right conversation can move someone forward. Her mess is her message. Welcome.
I just love that. Her mess is her message.
Thank you. Yeah, everyone needs to embrace their mess, right? It's the only way that you actually get to learn from it and evolve. So thank you for having me. I know I mentioned this to you guys earlier, but it's an honor, and I'm so happy that you guys have created a forum and a platform to be able to speak about things like this, because as you know, it can still be quite taboo, and I'm so excited to be a part of this movement that you guys are creating. So
thank you.
Thank you both to you guys, and much respect to you, aunties, still young at heart, but I feel very blessed to be here. So thank you.
Thank you so much. In today's topic, we're talking about divorce, and it's actually a topic very close to, I think, at least the three of us here. We have Sheena, my daughter, Kavita, who's equivalent to my daughter, and myself, who have gone through this experience. Auntie Kamal has been fortunate not to have gone through that. So she will be, but she's very compassionate. She's been very involved in my life. She's known me since I was 12 years old. So we wanted to talk about divorce for all those who are tuned in, because this is something especially our South Asian community wants to not talk about, or they think when you do go through it, you tend to become, and Kavita mentioned this earlier, the black sheep of the family. I've been labeled that for a long time. And my divorce was 30 years ago. And it's so important to address it because it's something that happens all the time. And it's only when we can talk about things that people can understand. So Prem Connection is not just about connecting people, because there are many people out there that need to create this story again. And it's only when you listen to stories like Kavita, you will understand it's okay to go through situations that don't work out, and it's not the end of the world. So on that note, Kavita, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, sure. So I think Sheena gave a great introduction there. I have actually had to unfortunately shift, with the pandemic and everything that's been happening the past year. I have been in the fashion and retail industry for 15 years plus, and unfortunately at the brink of COVID, I had lost my job. Retail was one of the hardest hitting industries. So it's very tough for me. I felt like I lost my identity. But I had to pick up the pieces, and it took quite some time, pretty much almost a year for me to figure out what it was that I wanted to do next. So it took a lot of time. I think I've kind of reinvented myself again. I keep joking, saying that I've had so many rebirths that I feel like I need, another birth certificate, like for every single rebirth I've had. My God, how many times can I be reborn? But it gave me a great opportunity to shift my focus. And as much as I love retail and fashion, I think it'll always be near and dear to my heart. But wellness has been something that's been so important to me. And I think even more so this past year, I think for all of us. So shifted my focus, and, an entrepreneur, working on a few things in regards to work. Beyond that, I am a single mom. I am 42, and I have a gorgeous and rambunctious almost 8-year-old daughter who is the love of my life. And so I'm so proud of her and really happy to have her. And she came from, my marriage. And so, all very worth it. But yeah, that's a bit about me and my background. I'm happy to discuss, kind of my past, say 20 years, because that's how long I've known my ex-husband.
So 20 years. So let's start right from the beginning. How did you meet him and how old were you?
Oh God. So I met him back in 2002. So, organically at a bar. So I was in my early 20s. I actually seeked him out, so a mutual friend of ours, I was dancing with him and I saw my ex from the corner of my eye and I knew that I had to know him. So I got to know him. We dated for about 4 years before we got engaged. We had a year-long engagement and then married for 12 years. So we gave it a solid try, it's not like, we didn't try, we definitely did. So it was great, but challenging. I think looking back, if I may say, I wish that we had communicated effectively about hard things early on, and I think that's what really kind of drove us apart, was the breakdown of the communication. I think that silence and the lack of sharing our individual needs over the years created this resentment and mistrust and disrespect. And, no one preps you for these challenges that you face in love, relationships, marriage. I'm not pointing finger at all to my friends, family, parents. It's just, it's the times that we lived in. And I wish we did have conversations prior to even dating about life goals or values, my non-negotiables, his non-negotiables. I think these are things I didn't even know about myself until the mid to late 30s. And to be honest, I'm still learning today. As I mentioned, I'm 42 and I'm still learning. So, I think statistics show that the longer you wait to make a commitment to someone, the better the chances are of marital success. And I want to pivot that to saying that this speaks volumes to the divorce rates we see in the South Asian community because of the societal pressures we get from our family, or that we put on ourselves.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you: is your ex-husband was he Indian?
He's actually half. So he is half Gujarati and half French.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you think that played a part in lack of communication? Maybe that there was. I mean, divorces happen all the time, but do you think that difference in culture was there possibly?
Yes and no. I mean, I think that, because he still was very, he was so accustomed to the Indian culture. Granted, his dad didn't grow up in India, actually grew up in Africa, but very accustomed to the Indian culture. Mm-hmm. If you know my family, the minute you're introduced to my family, you're accustomed immediately. So that was, he didn't really have an option there. But yeah, I think part of the communication breakdown could have been there, but I don't want to point finger at that because, even today, as I'm seeking to fall in love again, it's not necessarily that I'm looking at Indian or non-Indian. Like for me, I don't see culture or color as a reason to love, right? So I don't believe that was the reason. I really think the biggest reason was the fact that we just didn't align on our values and our morals, and those are kind of the biggest things that you should be talking about. But it's on your first date. You're not going to pull out a piece of paper and say, hey, this is my guiding compass. These are my non-negotiables, right? So, however, today, I do think people are having those types of conversations. Yes. I wouldn't say on the first date, but I would say that they're knowledgeable enough to know that these are vital conversations to have to be able to progress in a relationship. And I would say date, 4, 5, maybe even 6, you have these conversations. And if you're going in that direction, it's safe to speak about these things.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on its head that I think communication, Pashi and I, we favor our marriage that we communicate about everything. And I think that is, and of course, morals and other values, you bring in, but I think key is communication, no matter what it is. If you can communicate, I think it's a success.
Yeah.
So I think communication is important, but sometimes there's certain things that people don't communicate, and when when the trust breaks down, how do you communicate? There's always going to be one party that's not going to communicate. So what happened, Kavita? I mean, you were engaged for 4 years. I mean, well, you dated for 4 years, had an engagement for 1 year, and then you got married. So when did you see this break coming, or when did you know, I should not have done this? When did that red signal?
I to be honest, I think even early days when we were in the relationship and kind of courting each other, I think we both realized that there were some pretty solid differences between us.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that's where I wish I would have said, hey, this is a big sign. Like, we probably should part ways and move forward and or move apart. But that, again, being in your 20s, you are in this honeymoon stage. You think you're madly in love. So these important conversations don't really come up, and you continue progressing thinking, oh, this is just a time and moment. We're gonna.
Could you talk about one of those things, maybe? I mean, what was like one example?
Yeah, sure. There's a few. I think some of the biggest ones was really around, I think just our values about even family. He, although I love his family, and we still communicate with the family, but I grew up in a very, very different family than he did. I have a very massive circle, of friends and family, and I think that just comes with being South Asian, right? So part of the South Asian community, and I think that was a very big disconnect. Like, for me, it's so important to spend time with your family. And for him, it was very important for him to spend time with his friends. And so that, I think, to begin with, was a big disconnect. And I just thought over time it would change. As you get older, things will change. I think that was a big mistake that we both made, thinking that people can change. And I'm not saying that you can't. I want to give credit to everyone. I think there's absolutely opportunity for people to change. But I don't think that your morals and your values end up changing, right? So you've been brought up a certain way, and this is the values that have been instilled in your life. That is something that you continue to carry forward within your relationships, within, when you're bringing up your children and what you instill in your children. And I think that was the biggest thing. And again, I think it goes back to truly what your non-negotiables are. What are your values, right? And what values were instilled in you as within your family. And that, I think, really is what I think that those were kind of the biggest moments in our relationship where I realized this may not work, but I continued thinking that in time things would change.
So what was the breaking point? What was it? What was the day who said enough? Was it you?
We both did. There were many years. We saw it coming. I would say it was probably we both would argue, and during the arguments, we both said very nasty things to each other. And I think eventually, it's probably, we've been divorced for 2 years. So I would say 2 or 3 years prior to that, we were married for 12 years. So there were definitely moments where we both would just say, this isn't going to work. We need to get a divorce. But there were fears, right? We had a child, a very young child. We were afraid of the backlash we would get from our family. And I'm sure that we would have gotten divorced much earlier if those weren't fears. So, to answer your question, I think that the underlying issues were just always there. And we waited really until the last minute when both of us realized that we just can't take this anymore. And so that must have been maybe like 4 years ago when we started the separation process.
So I know
it was both of us. And I have to say, I really did come forward and say, this isn't healthy for either one of us. It's not healthy for our child because she would see us fighting. And I didn't ever want her to be in that type of environment. And I think he saw that as well. So, I think I pushed it forward more than he did because, him being the man in the relationship and wanting to ensure that he's supporting the family, I think it was hard for him to say, or just, hard for him to feel like it was an easy moment to walk away, knowing that he had to not just support me, but also a child.
Mm-hmm.
So I know in the South Asian community, therapy and counseling is not exactly
Talked about.
Mm-hmm. Did you seek counseling, if I may ask?
We did. Yeah, we definitely did. But counseling only works if you want it to work, right?
Correct.
So I think that we both at that point were probably checked out. In our mind, the separation had already happened. We were already going through the motions prior to making it official. And so, yes, we tried. I think what would have been beneficial is had we gone through therapy prior to even getting married. And I know that people look down upon that, saying, like, why would I go to therapy before even getting married? We don't have any issues. Well, issues are going to arise. I mean, you could have issues with family. You could have issues with a roommate, right? And if you want to be able to sustain a healthy relationship, again, I think it goes back to communication. But if you want to, have a healthy relationship, a mediator is always, I think someone that would be very helpful. And these are things that I wish that I would have done prior to even having made that commitment with him.
Once you made the decision of separating or starting the process, what did you feel? Were you relieved, or were you still very anxious, or was there still thought that maybe you can get back together? What were your thoughts?
Oh God. It was painful. I would say that, so we've been divorced for 2 years. I would say the first initial thoughts was it was scary. We were married for 12, but together for much longer than that. And I didn't know what it would be like to be alone. And that too, with a child, being a single mother. I mean, I barely can change light bulbs in my house, So it was really frightening to think that the person that I've been leaning on for so many years is no longer going to be around. I think the biggest concern for me was like, now what? What do I do? How do I live on my own and figure things out for myself and for my child? And yes, there were concerns about me, but there were also a lot of concerns about my daughter, and that, I think that really affected both of us. But I will say that, I think it was, we started the separation process pretty early on, and we informed our daughter pretty early on. She was in preschool when we actually told her. And we sat her down and tried to explain that, mommy and daddy are going through something that's been difficult, and we're going to live in 2 different homes, and that had nothing to do with our love for her. Our biggest concern was really just her mental well-being, and she adjusted. I mean, she was young enough to, I think, adjust. But she wasn't happy about shuffling back and forth. But it was so apparent to us that she noticed the change in our relationship. And that, I think, was very eye-opening for both of us. And for both of us, it was just really important to create a healthy co-parenting relationship. That was our number one priority. And what we've instilled in her, even today, is knowing that regardless of what happens, the 3 of us are still a family, and we're a unit that can't be destroyed. So I feel like, coming out on the other end, we feel pretty lucky having had the relationship we do. I mean, don't get me wrong, we both have major blowout arguments. I mean, it happens. But to answer your question, Auntie, I think the first 6 months were probably the darkest times for me. I found myself on dating apps trying to keep myself occupied. I was going out more than ever. I was drinking way too much. But luckily, I had solid friends and a great support system who advised me that I need to slow down and start to embrace the loneliness. But that was really the hardest part. And that's when my work started. That's when Kavitha 2.0 was born.
Well, I definitely relate to what you're saying. I think initially when you get your freedom, you go through stages of anger, a lot of anger. Then you go through stages of I'm so happy I'm free. Then again you go back into anger. Then you have these notions I should go back. Should I go back? Back and forth. And I think it just happens to you one day when you wake up as a new person. You're like, oh my God, why did I even bother? Why did I even go through that? New me.
Yeah.
But in terms of, you mentioned about your daughter and telling your daughter that you guys are a unit. How do you, if a child listens to that, I'm playing devil's advocate, listens to that, okay, we're a unit, it's going to be mom, dad, and me, even though they're in two separate homes. And tomorrow, Kavitha or dad meets somebody else. How is she going to accept suddenly this unit is not going to be 3 anymore, it's going to be 4?
Yeah, no, that's a great and valid question and point. Well, what we have done is we've committed to ensuring that we brought no one into her life. This is, again, when she was quite young, right? So today she's almost 8, and she's old enough to understand that love exists in many different forms, right? And you have boyfriends and girlfriends, and we both have very open and honest conversations with her about these things. So, but yeah, it is tough, but what we did was we said when she was in preschool, we are not bringing anyone around her that is of the opposite sex that we are dating to ensure that she still feels safe. We want her to feel safe, and we want her to know that it is just us 3. And it takes a lot of work. And I'm not saying that is the case for everyone. That was for us. And we thought that was the best experience for her. The point where the 3 of us would do things together. We actually got backlash for it. Like, you're confusing your child, you're confusing us. Like, family would say, you're confusing us. You're bringing him around to these family events. You guys are traveling together. You're getting on a plane and going to London together. People were just like, what the hell is happening with you? But, I had to communicate and be very clear and say that this isn't for my ex-husband and I. This is for my daughter. Yeah. I want her to realize that regardless of what happens, we're still going on family trips together. We're still having weekly dinners together. And that was very, very important to us. And so you have to create these guidelines, and you have to make sure that you stick to them, right? And I think that is what makes a successful co-parenting a relationship. Today, fast forward, you're right. I mean, she does know we're a unit, and I think that we've done that groundwork over the past kind of 4 years of showing that what we said is really what we meant. And so she knows that, like, mommy and daddy is going nowhere. Even if we did introduce her to someone that I fell in love with, or that he fell in love with, or was just even, again, we don't really introduce to anyone that we're casually dating. But if and when the time did come, we have explained to her that there is a chance that daddy could have another baby, or, I've already said off limits, but, I said, there is a chance you could have another sibling, or there's a chance you can have a stepmom. And she asked, do you ever think I'll have a stepdad? And I said, I don't know, but there is a chance. And so we've prepared her for that. And I think kids these days are, there's so many conversations that they're having in school, and it's very different. I think it's become very progressive. And so, again, I believe we did some pretty strong groundwork to just prepare her.
That's good.
So, most women, when they go through a divorce, say, I'm never doing this again. Never. Yeah. I'm never. They write it. They swear by it. They go in front of the mandir, the good cast.
Yeah.
Right. I'm going to be a party animal. I'm going to enjoy my life, and I'm never going to go through this again. And then sometimes that never changes. What did Kavitha say? Did you
I
say
said the same thing. I took an oath and I said, no way in hell am I getting remarried. And you know, I'm still there, meaning I'm not saying no. I'm just saying that my perception has changed, right? And I think this is part of the conversation that I want to have today is that, you know, I think the conversation we need to have with our children is that there needs to be a shift. You know, it isn't about marriage. It's not the end all be all. That's not the number one priority. It's about, for me at least, being a good person. You know, and if and when I do find love again, I don't feel like I need to sign paperwork, you know, to commit to somebody. And that's just how I feel. I mean, I think marriage is a beautiful thing. And I think it's amazing that people have the courage and the confidence to remarry again. I'm just saying today that's not for me. Not to say that I'm not going to fall in love with someone and don't want to commit myself to someone. I'm happy to even have a celebration party. Like that's not, you know, that's not my issue. My issue is with the fact that we've created this environment to make people feel like they have to sign some sort of paperwork to say that I'm committed to you. And that doesn't work for me. It just doesn't sit well for me. And that's what I'm teaching my daughter today. I don't want her to ever feel that type of pressure. I think giving options is vital in seeing the future generations succeed. And I think we need to change the dialogue that we have with our children, and educate them on communication skills and how to adapt to change, ensuring them that, you know, like I said, marriage is not the end all be all. So I'm not saying anti-marriage, you know, that's not my issue. It's just that for me, I just don't feel like love has to have some sort of official signature to it.
You're not saying that you have to validate it with a piece of paper, you know.
Exactly. Yeah. I'd love to be in a committed relationship with someone eventually, you know, and whatever that looks like for us. I think we make up our own rules. You know, if that means we live together, great. Or if we have two separate homes, fine. You know, as long as we have instilled the important attributes and values that we both, you know, find to be really crucial in a relationship, I think that's all that matters. You know, just, and that's, again, that's for me. And I don't want to speak for anyone else because I'm not saying that marriage is a bad thing. It's just, I'd prefer not to go that route because I don't feel like I need to make commitments that are based on what the court has asked us to do.
Right.
So one of the big things that comes up with a lot of people and the rush to get married, whether it's South Asian or not, is first of all, in our South Asian community, the pressure is it's always been by 24, 25, hurry up and get married because bachas have to come. You know, the older you get, those bachas are not going to come. So the pressure becomes with kids. So what would your advice be to all, you know, since we're celebrating Women's Month in March, it's just appropriate. What would your message be to women out there that feel that pressure and think, you know, I don't want to get that, I don't have that piece of paper, but I want to have the baby. I want to have an extension of my life someday.
Then have the baby. You know, why do you need a piece of paper? You know, you just have the baby. I mean, look, I had a baby and I still got divorced. There's no guarantees, right? So I think that's the biggest conversation that we have to have. There's no guarantees in anything in life. You take a risk, and sometimes you take the wrong risk. Sometimes you take a calculated risk, and it's really up to you and the universe as to how that ends up going for you. But I would just say that having a child out of wedlock, that's not looked upon as, you know, being, you know, something that isn't acceptable these days. I know it still is within certain communities, and I think that's why we're having these conversations today, and I'm so grateful for it, is to eliminate that stigma. Like, you can have a child out of wedlock. Who says you can't, right? Again, you make your own decisions. But I think it's important for us to start having these types of dialogues and giving people the confidence and the encouragement that it is okay to live your life differently than how you know, our parents
Right.
have asked us to, kind of set up our life.
Yeah, I mean, recently I had dinner with a couple of young girls who, one of them has gone through a divorce second time and one's gone through a divorce third time. And I said, it's okay. And really, it was funny because when I talked to a couple of other friends, they raised their eyebrows. I'm like, what is it to raise your eyebrows about? It didn't work out. It's better to be, living alone, to be miserable just for the sake of, worrying about what other people are going to say.
Yeah. Well, and what I would say to those women who have gotten married multiple times or now on their third or fourth or whatever it might be is just to encourage them and say, continue dating and have a great relationship with this person. Do you feel like you need to stand in front of a bunch of people and have a dog and pony show? I don't know, right? I mean, again, everyone has different values and morals, so I don't want to disregard that. But for me, it's such an important conversation that it's just how it kind of, again, what are your values and your morals? Is it important to love this person, and live a very simple and happy life with them, or again, to have that dog and pony show and say, hey, we want to have this massive marriage or commitment in front of a bunch of people that may or may not work out?
Those dog and pony shows are really expensive.
Seriously, just give me the money.
Yeah, they're really expensive. Sometimes
I know. It really is. I know. I always joke with my dad because, it's a conversation that we've had. And I said, hey, you know what? I gave you a child out of that dog and pony show. So
okay, I'm waiting then.
Yeah, exactly. But I wanted to say, I mean, I kind of going back to my Kavitha 2.0 version, I think the reason I'm also here is I'd mentioned to you guys that my mess is my message and that it's so important to have conversations. I feel like coming out of my divorce, I definitely had some sort of reinvention, and I mentioned to you that the first 6 months were pretty dark. I was going out a lot, obviously lots of kind of partying, drinking, being on the dating apps, but I was able to shift that, and I was spending a lot of time with myself and looking inward and starting my healing journey. And I had to constantly check in with myself to see if the wound was still open or closed. And if it was open, I knew that there was more work to be done. And through that work, I've had this amazing opportunity to grow and become the woman I am today. And I really feel like when you're vulnerable and authentic and show up as who you are, that's how you heal.
Yes.
And that's how I've been able to get where I am today. And excuse my language, but I feel like shit has to happen for a shift to happen.
Yes.
And many times that shit is not for the faint of heart. But if you stick with your commitments and you make to yourself, you can get through it. And for me, I've really kind of been focusing on self-love and self-acceptance, which is the hardest task ever. And I don't know if I'll ever get there, but I keep saying to myself that when you love yourself as much as what other people think about you, you will change your life. Because my biggest issue was always about what would people think. When I was going through the motions of the divorce, I kept having this thought in the back of my head of, what is everyone going to think? What are my friends going to think? What are mom and dad going to think? What's my brother going to think? What's the Indian community going to think? And I was so worried about that I started to focus on that and not focusing on what I needed, which is why I didn't get divorced a lot earlier. And I think, again, which is why it's so important for me to be here, is I think we need to start shifting that dialogue and that conversation. So I'm here today to have conversations that change people's lives and might be uncomfortable. But I plan on finishing this show that we call Life as I Am, authentic and true to myself.
Beautifully said. And I think one of the very important things is we all have to learn to live alone. I think when you're able to enjoy your own company and you realize you don't have to have someone sitting next to you all the time is when you can become that 2.0, because then you can really think for yourself. I think as women, we grow up thinking we have to be dependent on a man all the time or on a partner all the time, and that's the reason why it's just we think I have to have a partner, I have to have a partner. And in actual fact, there's nothing wrong with being alone.
Yeah.
It's okay to go, even if you're married, it's okay to go to a party alone.
Yeah.
You know,
You need alone time. Even
Yeah.
in a marriage, it doesn't matter. You need just that separate time, separate things, separate. You will enjoy your marriage a lot more than just being stuck at the hip all the time.
Really, and also, going to events. I mean, even now I'm married and I'll go to an event alone and people will say, what happened? I'll be like, why does everything have to happen? I just wanted to come alone.
Yeah.
And I came alone. Why do I have to come as a couple? Just because you're married. Yeah. So
your marriage doesn't define you, right? A relationship doesn't define you.
Exactly.
And we think that we need to, again, send that message out to everyone and say that, you are who you are because of you, not because of the person that you married or the relationship that you're in or the child that you have. I mean, you are your own authentic person. And I think that, especially as women, especially today, we need to really rise to the occasion and say, this is who I am. And it's not because of my job or my title or the color of my skin or the man or woman whatever you choose, whatever sex you choose, the man or the woman that I've married or that I've committed to. I am me because I am a very strong, independent, hardworking woman.
Exactly.
we have a few more minutes. So what's your closing message to everyone? We could have this conversation again and again. And I think it's, like you said, these conversations are so important. What is the one message you want people to get today?
I think I said it earlier. I am here to have conversations that change people's lives. And I said to you, my mess is my message. I think we should embrace the broken pieces. I think we should embrace the trauma we've gone through. I think we should embrace, all of the issues that we have and take that as, a learning and then shift it to new beginnings. And I think out of divorce, the biggest thing that's happened to me is I've reinvented myself. Mm-hmm. And I want people, and especially women, to hear that loud and clear, is that there is life after divorce and that there is reinvention that can happen. And if it's not divorce, it could be some other trauma. I know today we're talking specifically about divorce, but whatever that trauma might be, you're able to come out of it as a bigger and better person. And I think the biggest thing is that you have to believe in yourself, and love yourself, and know that you have a purpose. You have a purpose to be here, and it's so important to tell your story and share it with other people, because you have no idea who you've impacted by just sharing.
Absolutely. And, it's funny what you talked about, how you described divorce. When I went through my divorce and finally put a pen to paper, I still remember I'm still finishing this book. I haven't even I'm still writing it. I've written 2 other books. I haven't written this one. But the heading of this one is called Divorce is a Slow Death to an Incredible Beginning.
Yes. Love it.
And that's I really think I'm going to finish it now. I have to finish it after today. Yes, but absolutely. Kamal, Sheena?
Yeah, I mean, you have to be your own person, and you have to love yourself. And it doesn't matter if you're in I've been married over 40 years, but still you have to be your own person in order to succeed in a relationship. And like you said, don't get defined. Just don't get defined. And when you do, that's your downfall.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Again, I really, really appreciate you guys having this conversation. I think that it's so needed, especially in the South Asian community. I think we all just kind of need to trust ourselves and lean into it. And I think the stories that we buy into stick with us. So it's important to buy into the right story.
And it's so important to share your stories because, like you mentioned, other people will listen and think, oh, that happened to me, or, I can learn from this. So, well, thank you again for coming on our show. It's been so wonderful. I was thrilled. Both Kamal and I were so thrilled when we saw your name, and I was like, is this the same Kavita that we know? Oh my gosh, this is awesome.
Yeah, I know. She knows
a huge fan following.
Are you the daughter of so-and-so? And I said, yeah, that's
and
me.
a huge fan following you have. So I know as soon as we posted it on social media, we were like, oh, these people are writing. Thank you so much. And over to you, Ms. Sheena, a technical person.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. And we are going to be closing out. This is Prem Connection, and we will see you guys next week at 7 o'clock.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Bye.